There is a part of you that watches quietly when you judge others. It shows up in the irritation you feel towards certain people, the envy you don't want to admit, the anger you suppress, the desires you label as not me. You may believe you are in control of yourself, yet this part often speaks through reactions rather than thoughts. Carl Jung warned that until this hidden part is made conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This hidden force is what Jung called the shadow, and understanding it is not a philosophical luxury, but a psychological necessity. When Jung said that this part of us speaks through reactions rather than thoughts, he was pointing to the difference between consciousness and unconsciousness. Conscious thought is deliberate. You pause, evaluate, and choose. Reactions, however, erupt before reflection. They appear as sudden anger, defensiveness, attraction, contempt, anxiety, or shame. In those moments, you are not deciding, you are being moved. The shadow operates precisely here, bypassing reason and expressing itself through the body and emotions. You may believe you are rational and self-directed, yet notice how quickly a single comment can ruin your mood, how effortlessly someone can provoke irritation, or how instinctively you justify yourself when criticized. These reactions feel automatic because they are. They come from parts of the psyche that were never fully integrated into conscious awareness. The ego experiences them as just how I feel, without realizing that something hidden has been activated. Jung emphasized that the unconscious does not argue or explain, it acts. It hijacks tone of voice, facial expression, posture, and impulse. This is why people often say things they later regret or behave in ways that contradict their values. In those moments, the shadow has temporarily seized the steering wheel. The ego believes it is in control, yet control was never consulted. This is also why self-image collapses under pressure. A person may see themselves as calm, kind, or disciplined until stress reveals impatience, cruelty, or chaos. The shadow does not announce itself politely. It reveals itself when the ego is tired, threatened, or cornered. Reactions are therefore not weaknesses to be eliminated, but signals to be interpreted. Jung believed that freedom does not come from suppressing reactions, but from slowing them down with awareness. The moment you can say, "Something in me is reacting," instead of "This is who I am," consciousness expands. That small gap between stimulus and response is where integration begins. The shadow loses power not when it is fought, but when it is seen. In this sense, reactions are invitations. They show you where your self-knowledge ends and unconscious material begins. To ignore them is to remain governed by forces you do not understand. To study them is to reclaim authorship over your own life. The shadow is not evil by nature, yet it can become destructive when ignored. It is also the source of creativity, vitality, authenticity, and power when integrated. To encounter the shadow is to face what you have rejected in yourself. To integrate it is to become whole. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, refers to the unconscious aspects of the personality that the conscious ego does not identify with. It contains traits, impulses, memories, and desires that were judged unacceptable by the individual or by society. These traits are not necessarily immoral, they are often simply inconvenient, painful, or threatening to one's self-image. As children, we learn very quickly which parts of us are rewarded and which are punished. The rewarded traits become part of the conscious personality, while the punished traits are pushed into the unconscious. This repression is not a conscious decision, but an adaptive survival strategy. The psyche hides what might lead to rejection, shame, or loss of belonging. Over time, this hidden material accumulates and forms the shadow. Jung emphasized that the shadow is personal but also collective. On a personal level, the shadow is formed from your own lived history. It includes specific experiences, emotions, and traits that were rejected because they conflicted with how you learned to survive and belong. Moments of humiliation, punishment, neglect, or misunderstanding teach the psyche what must be hidden. Over time, these rejected parts do not disappear, but become unconscious aspects of the personality. These traits can include anger that was discouraged, confidence that was labeled arrogance, sensitivity that was mocked, or desire that was shamed. The shadow therefore reflects not who you truly are, but what you were not allowed to be. Each person's shadow is unique because each life imposes different limits. Understanding this personal layer is crucial because integrating it means reclaiming lost aspects of your own identity rather than fighting some abstract darkness. On a collective level, it holds universal human instincts that civilization has attempted to tame: aggression, sexuality, dominance, and raw emotion. Modern society, in particular, is skilled at producing large shadows. The more a culture emphasizes politeness, productivity, and moral purity, the more it drives instinctual life underground. Jung did not see this repression as a moral failure, but as a psychological imbalance. What is repressed does not disappear. It waits, and it returns, often in distorted or destructive forms. One of Jung's most important insights was that the shadow is most visible not within us, but in others. This happens through a mechanism called projection. Projection occurs when we unconsciously attribute our own disowned traits to someone else. The person who irritates you deeply often carries something you refuse to see in yourself. The traits you despise most may be the traits you fear owning. This is why moral outrage can feel so emotionally charged. The shadow does not whisper, it reacts. It emerges in moments of rage, jealousy, contempt, and superiority. Jung noted that people with strong moral identities often have the darkest shadows. The more rigid the persona, the social mask, the more pressure builds beneath it. The shadow seeks expression, and when denied healthy channels, it erupts uncontrollably. This is how individuals who see themselves as good commit acts of cruelty while remaining blind to their own capacity for harm. Jung believed that unconsciousness, not evil, was the greatest danger to humanity. History, in his view, was filled with examples of collective shadows exploding into violence. War, genocide, and fanaticism are not random events, but psychological phenomena. They arise when societies refuse to confront their own darkness. Understanding what Jung meant by integrating the shadow requires correcting a common misunderstanding. Integration does not mean indulging destructive impulses. It does not mean acting out aggression, cruelty, or immorality. Integration means conscious relationship. It means recognizing the shadow as part of oneself without allowing it to dominate behavior. Jung argued that morality based on repression is fragile. True morality emerges from awareness. A person who knows their capacity for destruction but chooses restraint is more trustworthy than one who believes themselves incapable of harm. The integrated individual is not pure but honest. They do not confuse innocence with goodness. They understand that light gains meaning only in relation to darkness. To integrate the shadow is to stop lying to oneself. It requires humility, courage, and sustained self-observation. This process often begins with emotional discomfort. The shadow is encountered in moments of shame, defensiveness, and inner conflict. Instead of justifying these reactions, Jung encouraged inquiry. What part of me is being threatened? What am I refusing to acknowledge? Shadow integration is inseparable from Jung's larger concept of individuation. Individuation is the lifelong process of becoming one's true self. It is not about perfection, but completeness. The ego must expand to include what it once excluded. This expansion feels like loss before it becomes growth. When a person identifies too strongly with a persona, such as the nice one, the strong one, or the rational one, the shadow grows correspondingly. Integration requires softening these rigid identities. One must allow contradictions to exist. You can be kind and aggressive. You can be disciplined and impulsive. You can be moral and flawed. The psyche seeks balance, not purity. Jung believed that neurosis often arises from a one-sided personality. The psyche compensates by producing symptoms, dreams, and emotional disturbances. These are not failures, but messages. Dreams especially are a primary language of the shadow. They reveal what the conscious mind avoids. Symbols of pursuit, violence, decay, or forbidden acts often indicate shadow material seeking integration. Shadow integration begins with watching yourself without immediately condemning what you see. Moral judgment acts like a trap door. The moment you label a reaction as bad, weak, or unacceptable, the psyche hides it again. The unconscious does not reveal itself to hostility. It withdraws. Simple observation works differently. When you notice a reaction without trying to fix, justify, or suppress it, the inner space stays open. You are not approving of the behavior, nor are you acting it out. You are studying it with clarity. This distinction is crucial. Understanding precedes choice. The shift Jung pointed to is the movement from self-attack to self-inquiry. Condemnation tightens the ego's grip and strengthens repression. Curiosity loosens that grip. It allows buried material to rise into awareness without overwhelming the psyche. Only what is seen calmly can be integrated consciously. When Jung said that only what is seen calmly can be integrated consciously, he was pointing to the psychological fact that awareness requires emotional stability. If you meet an inner impulse with fear, shame, or aggression, the ego goes into defense mode and the unconscious retreats. Calm attention signals safety. It allows the ego to observe without being overwhelmed and allows the shadow to appear without needing to disguise itself. In this calm state, the impulse is no longer fused with identity or behavior. It becomes an object of reflection. From that distance, choice becomes possible. Integration happens not through force or moral struggle, but through steady, non-reactive presence that transforms blind impulse into conscious understanding. Jungian analysis, in particular, provides a structured container for shadow work. However, integration is not confined to therapy. It happens in relationships, work, creativity, and solitude. Creative expression often allows the shadow to speak symbolically. Art, music, writing, and myth provide safe channels for unconscious material. Jung believed mythological figures represented archetypal shadows of humanity. By engaging with these stories, individuals gain distance from their own darkness. This distance allows reflection instead of possession. Another essential step to integrate with your shadow is withdrawing projections. This means recognizing that what you see in others may reflect something unresolved within you. This does not invalidate real harm, but it reduces psychological blindness. As projections dissolve, energy returns to the self. This energy fuels growth, creativity, and inner stability. Becoming whole does not mean becoming comfortable. Wholeness includes tension. Jung warned against premature harmony. Integration is an ongoing dialogue, not a final achievement. The shadow evolves as consciousness evolves. What was once unconscious may become conscious, and new shadows may form. This is not failure but change through time. The integrated person becomes less reactive and more responsible. They are harder to manipulate because they know their own vulnerabilities. They do not need to perform moral superiority because they no longer fear their darkness. This internal alignment produces quiet confidence. Jung believed that psychological health was not the absence of conflict, but the ability to hold opposites without collapse. Light and dark, order and chaos, reason and instinct. To integrate the shadow is to accept the full weight of being human. It is to stop demanding innocence from oneself and others. It is to live with depth rather than illusion. In Jung's view, the future of the individual and of humanity depends on this work. Without it, we remain fragmented, projecting our darkness onto the world. With it, we reclaim responsibility for our inner life. And in doing so, we move closer to wholeness, not as an ideal, but as a lived reality.